This is Sonic Academy. I am Jimbo JTech, and in this video I am going to show you one simple trick that I use to really make sure that my song is filling the full space in the frequency spectrum that it can be. It's the concept of lift. It's about bringing things out in the mix that need to be brought out. It's about making things float higher in the sound space or lower in the sound space depending on what they need. It's extraordinarily simple, but it can be a little bit deceptive, and I think ever since I started thinking about things in this way, it just made my whole mix sort of feel like, like it's just spread further out into the sound space that it's playing in. So let's dive right in. So I have a project here that's still in the works. It's still under construction, and as such, a lot of the sounds are straight out of the synth. I haven't done much processing to them yet. At some point, to finalize this mix, I will be determining the amount of lift required for certain sounds when a label A&R team gets back to you and says, we need you to bring this sound out more, we need you to bring it up in the mix, we need it to be more visible. This is really a great technique to do that. It's also, it's the one EQ technique that's going to clean up, so many of your mix issues straight away. It's got a bit of high pass filtering, low pass filtering built into it, as well as, high and low shelf filters to really sort of nudge things up in the sound space. If you think about your 3D sound space as a sort of fish tank shaped sort of space between you and your monitor speakers. Ideally, you should be in an equilateral triangle with your monitor speakers, and the space in between is what you're filling. It's sort of this, and there are all these different dimensions to it. And so, the volume of a particular sound will bring that sound closer to you, or if you turn the volume down, it pulls it further back into the speakers. So there's this way of moving things around. So what we're looking at with lift is moving things up and down in the 3D sound space is the best way to think about it. So I'm just going to give you a quick play of this now. All right, I've added a little test print in here. That's the mix as it currently is, just bounced out. I can switch back to it and play it at any time. Currently identical to the overall mix. So before I was mentioning the 3D sound space, let's put an EQ on the whole mix and just explore what that sort of looks like. If I, take all of these high frequencies out of the whole song, then I'm pushing the whole song down in the 3D sound space, and it's down here now. And then, bringing these high frequencies back in, it's starting to fill this space up like that. Conversely, a high pass filter is sort of pushing things up and say if I had a bass instrument down here, I could high pass other stuff to stay out of the way of that bass instrument. So when looking at an individual sound, I might look at its frequencies, see what it's doing firstly with the frequency spectrum analyzer. This has like an analog, lots of airy bass stuff going on that I'm not really looking for. So the first way I would lift this up is to do a simple high pass and maybe give it a little bit of visibility with a high shelf boost. And then I would probably maybe just use a low shelf and just shelf that down a little bit. So that's the lifted version of this sound versus so it's cleaned up the low end. It's gonna clean up the low end of the whole song because there's a lot of unnecessary information that I've stripped out, as well as made things a little bit more visible. So I'm gonna do this to a few more sounds now. So I think when people high pass things and when they shelf things, they're not necessarily thinking about the level of lift that's required here. Like this sound has tons of treble in it. It might not necessarily need me to lift it up anymore. But what I could still do is pull out some of this mid-range. So I'm not making it any more trebly, but I'm still sort of like making it go higher, if that makes sense. You might not want to high pass a sound and get rid of all its bass harmonics altogether, in which case you could just do that. So there's instantly a bit more of a sense of visibility, of being able to hear the sound. And so I think where a lot of producers go awry is that they have so much low-end information. And I'm not really a believer in the whole high-pass everything. You know, some people do like to high-pass everything. You can do that if you want to. I think it's more about like if it needs it. That said, I will just sort of take a similar approach for a lot of these sounds. Now here's a sound that's actually maybe a little bit too lifted up, and so in this case I would actually sort of be nudging that back towards the other end of the spectrum. You can also push things out to either side of the frequency spectrum with a bit of a disco curve. That I would say is kind of fun. So I'm just going to do a couple more of these. So with each time I'm doing this, I'm just listening for, is this welling up too much in the low frequencies compared to what it should be? You'd be amazed how much doing this to your mix sort of feels like it's sort of stretching everything out to the full dimensions of what it can be. You know, in its initial state, I did feel a little bit like, you know, this sounded a bit too bunched up in the mid-range and the high mid. This is the old version. Let's listen to it now and see if it feels a bit more spread out. So lift is not just about, you know, bringing things higher in the mix, but it's also, you know, filling up the space lower down as well. So say with a, you know, with a kick, I think whenever you have a kick drum in your mix, let me see if I can find it here. You know, lifts can also be about, like, is there room to actually fill that lower sub? Do you have a bit more room down there to fill? Or it could be that your sub is too boomy, and you can make the whole mix a bit toppier by doing that. So really, I just want you to have that concept of lift in mind with everything that you do. You'd be amazed how much easier that makes anything else that you're doing EQ-wise, because so many of the problems have already been cleaned up by that one simple concept. In the next video, we're going to explore some techniques that I use to make sure my track translates to all the different kinds of sound system it's going to get played on. So stay tuned for that.